Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some things just make you feel yucky, and how that feeling might change over time? Well, a fascinating new study is diving deep into the sticky world of disgust and asking if we can actually get used to the things that gross us out, especially when life throws us some extremely messy curveballs. We're talking about parenting and its surprising effects on our disgust response. Now, we all know disgust is this powerful emotion that pops up to protect us from things that could make us sick, like rotten food or, well, other less pleasant stuff. It's designed to make us want to run away and avoid danger. And typically, this disgust feeling is pretty hard to shake off. You can't just think your way out of it, and even short exposures, like a few minutes or hours, usually don't make it go away. The big question researchers are asking is whether we can get used to disgusting things over a really long time, like months or even years. And this is where a clever study decided to look at a natural experiment that happens to millions of people. Becoming a parent. Think about it. Parenting means being confronted with bodily fluids and waste on a whole new level. But here is the twist. People usually don't decide to become parents or stop being parents just because of how gross diapers are. It is not like quitting a job you hate. This makes parents a really interesting group to study because their exposure to disgust isn't usually a choice. So the researchers gathered a group of parents, almost 100 of them, and compared them to about 50 people who aren't parents, acting as a control group. They used a few different methods to figure out how disgusted people were. First, they used questionnaires, asking about general disgust sensitivity and also specific disgust triggers related to parenting. But the really neat part was a behavioral task. They used a special computer program where people looked at images. Some images were neutral, and others were designed to trigger disgust, like pictures of diapers with different kinds of poop. The program tracked where people looked and for how long. One of the really smart things they did was create different types of diaper images. They had pictures of diapers with the yellow runny poop you see in babies who are only drinking milk, and then pictures of diapers with the firmer, more adult-like poop that comes after babies start eating solid foods, a process called weaning. They wanted to see if parents got used to one type of poop but not the other. And guess what they found? The control group, the non-parents, they reacted to the gross pictures as you'd expect. They tended to look away from the disgusting images, showing what scientists call behavioral avoidance. But the parents, especially those with kids who were weaned or already weaned, showed much less avoidance. They looked at pictures of diapers and other bodily gunk almost as much as they looked at neutral images. It seemed like they had gotten pretty desensitized. Here is where it gets really interesting though. Parents who had very young babies who were still exclusively on milk and not yet weaned, actually showed as much disgust avoidance as the non-parents. This was true even if these parents had older children who were already weaned. It's like there is a period where the disgust is still strong, even for parents. So, the overall picture is that parents, particularly after their children have gone through the weaning stage, seem to habituate to the disgust triggered by poop and diapers. And this habituation isn't just limited to their own child's poop. It seems to spread or generalize to other generally disgusting bodily substances too. The fact that parents with milk-fed infants still showed disgust avoidance, while parents with older kids didn't, suggests there might be a reason for that early sensitivity. The researchers think it could be an adaptive response to protect very young, vulnerable infants by keeping parents more cautious about potential contamination. Once the child is older and their immune system is a bit more developed, that intense caution might not be as necessary. Basically, the study proposes that the constant long-term exposure to disgusting things that comes with caring for a child, especially after that initial milk feeding stage, acts like a vaccine, making parents less bothered by these kinds of yucky things. Let's dig a little deeper into how they did this. They recruited parents and non-parents through an online platform. The parents were then divided into two main groups, those with infants who were exclusively milk-fed, and those whose children were starting or had already finished eating solid foods, the weaning group. They used a tool called the Disgust Scale Revised, which is a standard questionnaire to measure how sensitive someone is to different kinds of disgusting things, like core or contamination-related triggers. They also used a special version of this scale specifically for parenting-related disgust. But the real star of the show was the behavioral task. Imagine looking at a screen with two images. One is neutral, and the other is something gross, like a picture of a dirty diaper. You have a little window on your cursor that reveals the images as you move it. The idea is that if something disgusts you, you'll naturally move your cursor away from it, spending less time looking at it compared to the neutral image. This is a really smart way to measure disgust, because it is harder to fake than just saying you are not disgusted. It measures your actual behavior. They created their own set of disgusting images, including those different types of baby poop diapers. along with pictures of general bodily effluvia like vomit and other unpleasant sights. They also had neutral images to compare them to. They used fancy statistical models called linear mixed effects models to analyze all this data. Don't worry too much about that, but it is basically a robust way to look at how different factors, like being a parent or the type of stimulus, affect people's reactions. Now, for the juicy results on the self-report questionnaires, they found that generally parents and non-parents weren't too different in their overall disgust sensitivity. However, parents of children who were weaned or already weaned did report being less disgusted by parenting specific situations compared to non-parents. This suggests that while their general disgust might not change much, their disgust towards the specific things they deal with as parents does decrease. The big story was in the behavioral task, the one where they looked at images. Remember the control group showing avoidance? Well, the parents of weaning or weaned children showed very little avoidance. They gazed at the gross diaper pictures much like they gazed at the neutral ones. This was the strongest evidence for their disgust habituation. This graph here visually shows it really clearly. See how the lines for the control group tend to dip down, showing they looked less at the disgusting stuff. But the lines for the parents of older kids stay much closer to zero or even go up a bit, meaning they weren't really avoiding the gross images. And what about those parents with the tiniest baby still on milk? They were different. Unlike the parents of older kids, these parents actually showed more disgust avoidance than the non-parents. It's like they were extra cautious during that early milk feeding stage. The researchers think this might be a protective mechanism for the infant. Interestingly, they also found that older parents weren't necessarily less disgusted than younger parents within the parent groups. Their age didn't seem to be the main driver of their habituation, but rather the experience of constant exposure. So, what does this all mean? The study's main takeaway is that parents do indeed develop long-term habituation to disgust, and this happens most clearly after the early milk feeding stage, and as children start weaning or are already weaned. This habituation wasn't just to their own child's diapers, but also generalized to other generally unpleasant bodily stimuli. This research elegantly bypasses the usual problem of selection bias. In studies of professions like healthcare workers, it's hard to tell if they're less disgusted because they got used to it, or if people who were already less disgusted chose those jobs in the first place. Parenting, however, is rarely a job choice based on disgust levels. You become a parent, and then you deal with what comes. The finding about pre-weaning parents being more avoidant was a surprise. It suggests a possible evolutionary reason for heightened disgust during the most vulnerable stage of an infant's life, perhaps to keep both parent and baby safer from infection. In essence, this study provides strong evidence that our disgust responses aren't fixed. While disgust might be hard to overcome in the short term, sustained exposure, like the kind parents experience, can lead to significant long-term habituation. And this habituation can even spread to things that first grossed us out. It's a testament to our ability to adapt and cope with the many messy but ultimately normal aspects of life, especially parenthood. It shows that while disgust is a basic protective mechanism, long-term experience can indeed soften its grip. So, what is my take on this research? It is a really well-designed study that tackles a fascinating question by using parenthood as this natural experiment. The behavioral task is a significant strength, offering a more objective measure than just self-reports. The findings are compelling, showing clear evidence of habituation that generalizes. One limitation to consider is the relatively small sample size of the pre-weaning parent group. As the authors noted, this makes us a bit less certain about the surprise finding that they were more avoidant. Future research could definitely explore this protective aspect of early parenting disgust more deeply. Also, while the study focused on diapers, exploring how this habituation applies to other parental challenges, like dealing with vomit or sickness, would be interesting too. The real-world implication is pretty profound. It tells us that exposure therapy, which is often used to treat phobias related to disgust, has a real-world parallel in the everyday lives of parents. They're essentially undergoing a form of natural desensitization. It reassures us that even the most daunting challenges, like constant diaper duty, can lead to adaptation and reduce distress over time. It also highlights how our biology, to some extent, adapts to our environment and needs. This research opens the door to thinking about how other long-term exposures might change our emotional responses. It's a reminder that humans are incredibly adaptable creatures, capable of adjusting to even the most challenging circumstances. Thanks for tuning into RUBIN'S Mind Lab. If you found this exploration of parental disgust fascinating, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment with your thoughts or experiences. And don't forget to subscribe for more breakdowns of amazing science. See you next time.